I graduated nursing school when I was 18, which is, different. I guess in America you have middle school, but in the Philippines you only take like 6 years program in elementary, and then you go 4 years of high school and then the regular 4-year college. I was a consistent academic scholar at the time, and I did my master's degree right after I finished college through another scholarship. The hospital I worked at, they offered there's a new program for if you want to take your master's and you work at this hospital, we'll give you full reimbursement, free tuition fee. Yeah, nobody was doing master's at the time because the program was new. So I felt like this is an opportunity. I can't let it go. Otherwise, I can't go to master's degree without getting a scholarship. There's just no way because I was supporting my family.
Welcome to A Nurse First. This is Kathleen Eviza telling her own A Nurse First story.
Well, my parents passed away early on. I was 7 when both of them passed. My dad had a stroke, and I do remember that. That night, I woke up and it was raining so hard. And he has asthma attack, and I saw that scenario. My mom was pregnant at the time. It was raining so hard that there's no way I think they could go, but they eventually went. And then he was dead on arrival, unfortunately. And then 3 months after that, my mom gave birth. And so I remember that because she gave birth at home. First, she was by herself raising 5 kids at the time and was pregnant. Unfortunately, days after she gave birth at home, she had a cerebral aneurysm. It was me and my sister, and I was like, Mom doesn't look okay. For some reason, I remembered my uncle's number. I called him up. I was like, hey, something's wrong with Mom. They came up and then they went to the hospital, and she's brain dead at the time. My mom's side, they took care of us, 6 of us. For most part, we were all together. I guess it was hard to process it when you're a kid, but I know we were taken care of. And that's what's the most important part.
Joining Sigma and finishing her master's program opened the world up for Kathleen. Her thesis centered around the lived experiences of chief nursing officers in 10 of the biggest hospitals in the Philippines. And when her abstract to present at Sigma's 2015 biennial convention in the United States was accepted for a podium presentation, she was in disbelief.
And so I was like, this is not happening. This is true. I got accepted. And so when I got notified that I got the leadership grant, that's one, because there's no way I could go to the US without a scholarship. It's just too costly for me at the time. And when I got accepted, that not a poster, but a podium presentation, I was mind blown. I was like, is this real? This is my dream. Being out there sharing my thesis. And I was 23 years old at the time. So I was like, this is just, a miracle, really, for me. Starting to travel internationally gave me the confidence to consider new opportunities outside of the Philippines. That opened a lot of doors for me, a lot of opportunities. Another one being working for Johns Hopkins in Saudi Arabia, of all places. And that's for me, another adventure to go to. And that made me really excited. And having been to the US and now to another country, Saudi Arabia, being culturally different, as a young nurse, that was let's do it. I remember my first time that I was boarding in my layover to go to Saudi Arabia. This is it. You're going in a different soul. It's not only going to say vacation. I can remember myself thinking, is this really what I'm doing? I remember everyone was mostly in abaya, which is the black black clothing that mostly women wear. And I didn't know how to use it or like put a hijab on. I'm like, am I supposed to do it? Because I'm actually foreigner. So I remember just putting it on like, like a little girl. I didn't know what to do. But when I got there, everyone was speaking Arabic too. And I didn't know anything because my company, well, at least the recruiter didn't ask me to learn Arabic. I knew a little bit, like hi, hello, but it was still nerve-wracking. I remember the first week I moved in Saudi Arabia in the hospital. And, I was in a step-down clinic in the OR, so we do like excisions, outpatient. So you call patients. So one time I went outside of the clinic and called the patient. They usually go by their last names, which I didn't know at the time. And that's where I kind of realized like, okay, you gotta be culturally sensitive. Now it's like, I know that in my head, but until you get there and see what's going on, you really never know. I was conflicted because in Saudi Arabia, it's a different culture. It's a paternalistic society, and I respect that. It's culturally different. And I work in the OR, and so for most patient consents, that's one of the most important things that you have to check is consents for procedures. And this patient, she's an older lady. How she grew up in, it's very traditional for Saudi. So typically patients would give their consent that this procedure is being done. But for her at the time, she wouldn't sign it. At least the traditional way is that whoever is the male, that's the oldest male in the family, would give the consent for procedures. For her, the oldest family, the closest kin, the oldest one, is actually younger than her, which is, I think, an 18-year-old. We're doing a procedure in her body, but the consent is from an 18-year-old teenager boy. So that's like conflicting to me as a nurse. This is where cultural sensitivity awareness comes in.
You spent 2 years working in Saudi Arabia. Was this the longest you'd been away from your family? How did you balance wanting to be there for them with your dreams of exploring and learning from the world?
So it was my first time leaving my family. So leaving my family when I have to go to Saudi Arabia was, tough is a understatement. Philippines is my home, and going to a different country, especially Saudi Arabia, which is very culturally different, is, not an easy fit. But being the leader of the pack, losing my parents in a very young age, there's really nobody to give me a push but myself. But essentially being that person to be a trailblazer for my family and just showing them that things can be done and you just gotta do it is, I think, essentially a legacy that I wanted to leave with them, that if you want to achieve something in life, you just have to believe that you could do it. Culturally, professionally, and personally, it made me a better person. I owe it to that country and other friends that I met and mentors who I am as a nurse right now, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion. One of my favorite scriptures in life is going to come from Esther 4:14, and it does say, like, perhaps you were born for such a time as this, and be it like a difficulty, an adversity or a tragedy. Sometimes we get into this idea that, okay, this is so hard, I'm gonna have to change my game plan, but it's actually not what it is, at least for me. I felt like, I have to reground myself, recenter myself into thinking like, if I get through this, then I have achieved something, not only my achievements that inside of myself that, lifts me up and makes me think that, okay, if I've achieved this, if I pass through this, then as a person, I'm better, stronger, more courageous, bolder, as what Sigma says. The first thing is coming through that realization that we're more than what we think we are. of like what our limitations are as a person. And once we get through that, we'll actually think those adversities come in our way, making us a better person, because without that, we wouldn't know our limits. And so I've always go back to the scripture that we are meant to overcome and adapt and not to back down and be limited.
You certainly exemplify someone who has excelled at overcoming and adapting. And I think your experiences must be incredibly valuable in your role as a Sigma United Nations youth representative. Is that what drew you to pursue that global health leadership opportunity?
So I wanted to be a part of the United Nations team because it's an opportunity to show people around me that, regardless where you come from in life, you always have a voice. And it's me as a Asian coming from the Philippines, growing up there, going to Saudi Arabia, all these experiences in life. I think it's very important for people to know that there's a spot for representation, and that's what United Nations stands for. I believe that I could be a voice not only to my country, but also a voice to the world. I have a special story to say, and I want to represent those voices, people that I've met going through this lifetime, my friends, the youth in general. I want to be that spokesperson, and I owe it to them to speak for them if they cannot. I'm very grateful for Sigma for choosing me. I'm sure I'm just the one speck of those who applied, and so I'm trying my best to represent in a good way, and I'm just very grateful.
Thank you for listening to A Nurse First from Sigma. If you loved this episode, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It is very much appreciated. For more information about A Nurse First and Sigma, visit sigmanursing.org. Until next time.